Hi there, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com, and today I'm going to share with you a card that I think I've titled something like Triple Die Cutting with a Twist. And it's a really fun card to make. The version that I'm going to share today is a little different than another one that I've already put out in a video. This is a slimline card, and it features the hand-penned petals stamp set. It's super, super pretty. So I'm just going to throw this camera over to where I'm working, and I'm going to dive in. I know that light is a little bit bright. We'll tone it down just a little bit. This is an example of the card, and you can see that it is a slimline version. And we'll talk about the dimensions of the slimline card in just a minute. And one of the things that I really wanted to do in this card is I'm featuring all of the 5 new in colors because they're so pretty, and I just wanted to make sure that all 5 were included. So you can see that they were. I think the best way to show you this card is really to just get into making it. And I think you're going to find that it is pretty quick. There's not an awful lot of parts that need to be pulled together to make the card. And I mentioned briefly that I was going to talk about the size of this slimline card. This card is not the correct size to fit into the slimline envelopes that Stampin' Up! Sells. This is larger than those cards. This card will fit into a regular legal size envelope. And it is a little bit skinnier, but in terms of the width, it is just the perfect size to get into that envelope. And let me show you how we're going to make it. To start, you are going to need a piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock. I'm using basic white. And what I want to do, I want to cut this piece into 2 pieces. And those 2 pieces are going to end up being the card base. There's one piece of basic white that ends up being the card base. And then there's another piece that is the front panel. It's the piece that I did all the stamping on. The piece that I did the stamping on is 3 inches by 8.5. So this card is going to end up being 8.5 inches wide. That means that we're not going to have to do an awful lot of cutting to our 8.5 by 11 piece of paper to start. So I want to first cut the piece that I'm going to use on the front. Again, it's 3 by 8.5. Okay, well, I'm starting with a piece that is 11 by 8.5. So I want to keep the 8.5 inch as the length, but then for the width, all I'm going to do is put my paper at the 3 inch mark on the cutter. I have this, so the 11 inch is horizontal, the 8.5 inch is vertical, and I'm going to cut at 3 inches. This is going to give me the panel for the front. The remaining piece of paper is what I'm going to use to make the card base. And because I've taken 3 inches off of my length, I'm left with 8 inches by 8.5. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to score this in half. And you can see that I am scoring it on the 8 inch side. Obviously, that means I'm scoring at 4 inches. So this remaining piece is going to get scored at 4 inches. And then I'm going to burnish that. And it is literally that simple to make the base and the front of this card. And all I did was use one piece of cardstock. So here we have it. We have the piece that we're going to use as the panel, and we have the base of our card. So one sheet of paper. There's one more piece of cardstock that you're going to need. And in the piece that I used, the example that I made, it is the piece that is showing above and below that front panel. And since I wanted to use all the colors that are the end colors, what I did is I just chose on the example, I'm actually using a different color on the one that I'm going to make with you. I chose Orchid Oasis. And for this piece, I cut it to 3.5, but left it at 8.5. So very similar to what I did on the piece that we just cut. I put my paper into the paper trimmer with the 11-inch side horizontal. I brought the Orchid Oasis piece over to the 3.5-inch mark, and I just cut that. So what you're going to end up with is a piece of cardstock, and I'm actually going to use a different color in the In Color collection, Starry Sky, and I'm going to end up with a piece of paper that is still 8.5 inches wide, 3.5 inches high. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to just give it a little bit of a little bit of interest. So I decided, and this is completely optional, this has really nothing to do with the actual card design. I put my color cardstock into my scoring board, and you can see that it's at 3.5 inches. And I decided I wanted to just put 2 little score lines in. And these are scored at 1/8 of an inch in, and then another 1/8 of an inch in. So just 2 lines. And I turned my paper around and I did that scoring again. And it's really subtle, to be honest. When you look at the finished card, you can really not see too much of that detail. It does serve one other purpose when we get to putting everything together. But again, that is completely optional. So right now, we only have 3 pieces of paper that we are going to use to make the card. We have 1 piece of color cardstock. We have 2 pieces of our basic white cardstock. And just to really quickly go through these again, the color cardstock is 8.5 by 3.5. The piece that is going to eventually go on the front of that is the same width. It's 8.5, but it's only 3 inches high. And then the piece that is the card base, we got a theme going here, 8.5 inches wide, and it started at 8 inches. I scored that in half, scored it at 4, and that is going to be our card base. So eventually we're going to layer these 3 pieces together. We're going to work on the card front, the piece that I cut to 3 inches by 8.5 inches. And I am going to use a lot of the stamps that are in the Hand Penned Petals stamp set to decorate the front of the card. And I am going to, you can see, use quite a few. I've already put those onto some blocks. And I'm going to grab Memento ink. I really like using Memento ink for something like this because it tends, at least for me, it tends to give a really crisp image. And it's also something that I can quickly and easily clean off my stamps. StazOn I like as an ink, but I don't know, for some reason, Memento ink works just a little bit better for me. So what I'm going to do is, since the stamps are photopolymer, I want a little bit of a cushion when I'm stamping here. And I have my stamp pierce mat out. It just gives me a little bit of a cushion. And the first stamp, and I have cheated, I went ahead and I stamped this. The first stamp that I am going to put onto my piece of paper is my sentiment. And the reason for this is I want to make sure that I have enough room so that that sentiment shows, because I'm going to be adding a lot of stamps to this. And if I stamped first, I don't know that I would have left myself enough room. So my recommendation is pick whatever your sentiment is, and don't worry, just put it somewhere on your card. It really doesn't matter when you're done. And I chose to do this card with Sweet Sorbet for my sentiment. So that's what I used. And that thanks does come from the hand pen petals set. But now what I'm going to do, and I've got to cheat because I can look at the card that I already did. I am going to start with some of the larger images. And I am going to put them kind of randomly on my piece of the front. That's going to be the front of the card. I'm also putting a just scratch piece of notebook paper behind the panel, because I will be stamping in some cases off the side of the paper, and I don't want to get ink on the stamping pad that I have. All right, so Memento ink. I have made sure that this pad is nice and juicy. And when I'm using images like this that are kind of large, and they also have a lot of intricate lines in them, I turn them upside down and I put the ink on from the top, rather than having the ink like this and inking them up. I find if I do it in this way with the stamp facing up, and then if I put the ink on, I am much more likely to get an even distribution of the ink. And I'm also doing this little sort of pat and swirl. I don't know. We'll use that. I'm moving my ink pad, so I'm really trying to get good coverage. And then I'm not overthinking this. I want to kind of look straight down here, and I'm just going to find a place where I think that image looks pretty good. And I've got a little bit going off the edge. I'll just give that a nice push. And I really do want to give it a nice push because I want to make sure that I've got all of that image on, and I'll pop it off. Not bad. Now I'm going to bring in the other flower image from the stamp set. And before I figure out where I'm going to put it, I don't have any ink on this right now. I'm just going to kind of hold it over and think about, how do I want that? And what I'm trying to do is get this image, one on the stamp that I'm holding, kind of close to the one that I've already stamped down, but also to give it enough space that it will look like it is an image on its own. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. Just going to come in and really make sure that I'm getting some good coverage on here. And the more I use these stamps as I am creating this front, the better the stamp is going to take the ink. Even if I ink it up, stamp it off, and then ink it up again. And again, I'm just going to kind of look down here and see where I want that to go. Let's see. So I'm just going to put that straight down. Give that a good push. And pull that up. And that looks really nice as well. Now, this technique allows you to do as much or as little as you want. You could stop here and you can do some die cutting, and you'll see what that means in a minute. You could stop here and add some other little kind of background stamps or some other little images and have an absolutely beautiful color. But I want to show you, if you want to keep adding some images and really get a kind of a full view, you might want to do something like this. Now I'm using the same stamp that I used first. And I want it to look a little different. So I'm intentionally moving it in a different way. And I'm also going to try and get those leaves kind of to circle around that little leaf. And we'll see what happens. Put that straight down. And got a nice little push. And it looks different. It doesn't look like it's exactly the same stamp. I still have a little bit of area over here. So what I can do is I can even move my paper and come in from a completely different angle, which will make the flowers look very different, even though I'm using the same stamp that I've already used. So I'm just going to come in. And right now, all I'm trying to do is fill in the blanks a little bit. Obviously, you could use other stamps. You don't need to use only the stamps from a particular stamp set, but you can mix this up as much as you want. And let's see. That's kind of fun. We'll do it right there. So just, again, trying to get as much of the area where I'm stamping covered, but also to keep it close to the image that I've already done. Pull that up. And then if I wanted to do some more in here, I can. I can also stop at this point and say enough is enough. It's really up to you and what you want to do. And what is fun, I think, is even if you try to get the same pattern on multiple cards when you're making these, it's pretty tough, honestly, to place your stamps exactly in the same position every time you do this. So you will get different patterns, which is also half the fun. Right. I'm going to sneak in one little bit in here. I might just, let me just do those because that's nice and small. Get a couple of leaves and a couple of flowers, and then we're going to say we are done. So getting the background is pretty quick. Obviously, I'm not going to use the entire stamp. So I'm going to move my paper to make sure I'm not going to get ink on my little pad. All right. So there I have my background. And that's kind of pretty. Definitely a lot of flowers going on, a lot of different images, different shapes, and it flows across the page. If I show you what this looks like compared to the one that I did, very, very different. They're incredibly different, but every single one of them is going to just be unique. Now with the hand-pinned petals stamp set, this is a two-step stamp set. So there are a lot of solid images that you can use and you can fill in colors. And that's what I did. I'm only going to show you a few of these. I have actually cheated and I have another panel completed, and that's the one that I'm really going to concentrate on. But I just wanted to show you a couple of fun little tips if you're using this stamp set. So there are two leaves that are in the stamp set. One is a smaller one and one is a bigger one. And I am using the new Parakeet Party, which is one of the new ink colors to stamp this. But you're going to see that there's smaller leaves here, and then there's a larger leaf here. Well, these leaves, for example, are going in different directions. Okay. Well, what you can do with this stamp is you can have it in one direction for that leaf, and then you can turn it in the other direction for the other leaf. So you can actually change these up. Where, let me just do it here. You can have it going this way, or you can have it going this way. And they curve slightly differently. So you can use the same little stamp and just literally turn the way you're holding it and use it to color in two different leaves and have it going in two completely different directions. And then the same thing for the large stamp. You can have it going in one direction, you can turn it around, and you can have it in the other direction. And that's done intentionally, because if we look at some of these larger leaves, like right in here, I would stamp that one with that piece, and then I'm going to turn the other one and stamp it there. Now, one thing to notice is that the shapes are not going to completely fill in the outline of the image, and that's fine. That is absolutely fine. So what I did on the card is I continued to use different stamps, solid pieces that go with the stamp set. And I also played around with whether I wanted to use full ink strength. So I'll do that on this one, just to give you an example. So that is full ink of Tahitian Tide. I love that color. I absolutely love it. We're going to do this flower, and I'm going to stamp off before I put that onto the card. And this is, obviously you can get different looks by using the same ink and just give your card a little bit of depth. So definitely two different blues in that. And I think each one is equally pretty, but it really depends on what you like and how you want to bring out the colors. So I continued on the panel and I used all the different pieces. We have the second piece for this flower. We have the larger inside that goes into where I have the Tahitian Tide here. The smaller flowers are the ones that are in the Starry Sky and the Orchard Oasis. And then this little duo is the one that fills in the two flowers, and they were done in the Sweet Sorbet. So that's the pattern, using the solid pieces to fill in where the outline shapes are. But there's no piece that will fill in the stem on this particular stamp set. So what I chose to do for that is I got out my Parakeet Party, which is the color that I've used on the leaves. And I know I need to fill in the stems. So I just got a little bit of ink in the top lid of the Parakeet Party. And then I got out a blender pen. I love these, and they come in packages of 3. They last forever. And there's a little bit of a liquid in these pens that allows you to blend. If you just pick up a little bit on the end, and you can see when that color is going into the tip. And then all you're going to do is bring that pen right up the stem. And it is literally just going to blend that ink into the stem. And it allows you to use the same color that you had on your stamp, and just make sure that you can carry that through. And you can color in the stem and the other parts of the foliage. And when you are done with a particular color on your blended pen, all you need to do is make little circles until the circles don't show any ink. And that means that the ink is out of your blended pen. And I could literally put this into another color right now and it would not cause an issue. Or just pop the little tip back on and it's ready to go for the next time. I decided that you probably did not want to watch me color this entire panel or use stamps to get everything done on this panel, because that's not the most exciting thing that you can actually watch somebody do. So I cheated, and you're going to have to forgive me because there's a reason for me doing that. And I actually have another complete panel that I have done, and I'm going to bring that in. So this is the one that I did, and it is completely colored. I did it in the absolute exact same way that I just started on that first one. I did want to point out one thing, and I want to show you the difference in the colors. The card that I've completed, I did a lot of second generation color on here. On the card that is on the bottom, this is all first generation. So you can see the difference in the intensity. And I just thought it was really interesting to see the difference. All right, we are now about to get to the super fun part. We're about to get to the triple die cutting. And I am going to use the stitched rectangles dies. I love these, and I incorrectly thought that they were retiring, or at least I don't think they're retiring. If they are retiring, I will be incredibly sad, but I think I am mistaken that they are. These are fabulous. I use them all the time. And what I'm going to do is I want to kind of show you where we're going. We're going to die cut 3 rectangles, or I'm going to die cut 3 rectangles. And rectangles are not the only shapes that you can use for this. The shapes are fairly limitless, but I recommend that when you first do this, you either use rectangles, squares, or triangles. Anything that has a straight edge. And there's a reason for that, and I think that will become apparent in a minute. But I need 3 dies, and I want them to be just a little different in terms of size. And what I'm going to do, and this is what I suggest that you do, is get your dies and literally get them out. I've already figured out what 3 dies I'm going to use from the rectangle dies collection, and these are the 3. And you can use any ones that you want. The trick is that you're going to place them onto your card front, and you're just going to put them down and kind of figure out what looks good. And this is what I did when I was designing this card. So I put these down, and I thought, it's kind of cool. And the reason I liked it, a couple of things to keep in mind. We want these to overlap. We want the way I'm doing it, the one in the middle, I want it to overlap with both of the ones that are on either side. And I also want the overlap area to be enough. So like this piece that is shared with those 2 rectangles, I want it to be enough that there's a design on it that we're going to be able to see. And I'm also trying to make sure that when I place them, that the rectangle is going to go through a big image. Let me show you on the finished card. So what we're doing is we're making sure that we've got 3 die cuts that are going to allow us to still show that that focal point is a complete and flowing design. When you're happy with the way that your dies are, I highly recommend that you get out your phone and you take a picture. It is going to be incredibly useful. And I'm going to bring up the picture that I took. And the reason is a couple of things. You may change your mind. So if you find something that you absolutely love, and I took a picture, here's my picture. So I took that picture and I played around and I always came back to that picture. This is what I'm going to reference. So I've taken a picture of the way that I like these. All right, we are ready to die cut, but we need to do it in a particular order. So notice on the card, the 2 die cuts that I have my thumbs on are the ones that you can see the entire rectangle. The one on the bottom, you can only see part of it. All right, so if I can see these entire rectangles, that means these 2 are the ones I need to cut first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of washi tape and I'm going to tape down the ones that I want to die cut first. So I'm taping down those 2 rectangles that I want to die cut first. And I'm going to take this one out of the way. So now if I run this through my die cutting machine, I'm going to get that full rectangle cut and I'm going to get that full rectangle cut. And through the magic of videos, I've already done this. And what I'm going to end up with is this is going to be a die cut. And this is going to be a die cut. So I'm going to have a piece of paper that is going to have these 2 rectangles that have been die cut out. Obviously, you need to keep these 2 pieces, so just kind of keep them off to the side. Now, it is really, really helpful for me to remember where I had that 3rd die if I go back to the picture that I took. Because in that picture, I'm going to be able to see where that die was laid, like where over the flower I'm going to put my die cut or the die. And it really, really helps me to place that down because once I've taken the die off, it's not hard, but it's easier if you have a picture and you can just put it back on. So I know that is where I want that die cut to be. I'm going to use some washi tape. I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And again, with the magic of the video, I've already done that. So I have this die cut. And look at that. It is the wonkiest shape. And you think, this is not going to work. Well, it will. Trust me. All right, so we're going to put those die cut pieces off to the side for just a minute. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to assemble the card. And that just looks silly, doesn't it? But it will, I promise. It will look really, really good. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I am going to grab my card base. I am going to grab a piece of color cardstock that I cut out. And remember, this is 3.5 by 8.5. And I did choose to put the little score lines on the top and the bottom. All I'm going to do on this is I'm going to adhere this piece directly to the card base. And I don't need an awful lot of glue to do this at all. And a nice thing about this is that the width of this piece is the width of the card base. So it's pretty easy to figure out exactly where this needs to go. And I'm going to kind of eyeball to try to get as much white on the top and on the bottom And I'm going to press that down. So I've got my color cardstock, which is on the front of the card. The next thing that I want to do is I want to, believe it or not, I want to adhere this piece. And I know it looks silly, but it's really going to help us. And another thing that is very helpful is to line up this piece and to get it as straight and as in the middle as you might want it, is that second score line on the top and the second score line, so the one that's highest on the bottom, are your guides. If you did that, you want to put your piece so that it's right in between the two, and that's going to help just get it nice and straight. Make sure that you have your card oriented the right way so you know how you are going to put it on. I didn't like the first time that I stamped the word thanks, so I turned it over. That's why I got invented paper with two sides. And what I'm doing now is I'm just putting some glue on the back of this piece, and I'm going to put it onto the card front. And one thing I want to do is in the places where I've got these little triangles, or right here especially where that little piece is just sticking out on its own, I just want to put a little more glue there. I want to try to get that so that it will stay on pretty well. All right. So I'm triple checking that I have my card base oriented in the right way. And then I'm going to flip this over. And start on one side. Just kind of line it up as best as I can. And over to the right. And go ahead and adhere that to the front. Because I'm using liquid glue. Just down. All right. We are almost there. And I know that looks really, really, really weird, but it won't. So let's look at where we are and where we're going, because there's really only one more step that we need to do to get the basic part of the card done. You'll notice that on the three pieces that are missing, we have borders, we have frames that are around them. And what those frames are separate pieces of cardstock. I decided that I wanted to just make those frames a tad bit bigger than the actual pieces that I had cut out. So I went ahead and I measured them, and this is going to be unique to you, depending on what shape you have chosen and the sizes that you have chosen. What I suggest is that you take each of the pieces that you cut out, each of the die cuts, and just measure how wide and how long those pieces are. And what I decided to do is to make the color cardstock that I'm going to put behind those pieces 1/8 of an inch wider and 1/8 of an inch taller. And that gives me just this tiny, tiny border around that die cut, and that's what I want. So this is going to really depend on what you choose to do. But again, just measure the width and the height of each of your die cuts. And then if you make your color cardstock 1/8 of an inch wider and 1/8 of an inch taller, and you're going to have a nice little border that you can work with. Now this one is a little problematic because it's kind of hard to figure out the length and the width when you have a shape that looks like that. Well, what you can do is you can grab the die that you used to cut that piece and just cut out a scrap piece of paper. This is a piece of copying paper. So I know what size I'm going to need because I can measure the width of this the height of that. And then I can cut out a piece of cardstock that's an inch wider. And when I bring in the die cut piece that I got, it's going to fit fine. So it's just a little bit easier on that one wonky piece that you have to cheat, to go back and just make a die cut. And that way you have it and keep this. And you might even want to write on it what the measurements are. So the next thing we want to do is we want to just glue our die cut pieces and our frames together. And you don't need a lot of glue for this. Just kind of stack them together. So we're going to have our die cuts with frames. And you also have a lot of options here because you can use the same color for all frames. Or I decided I wanted to just have a little fun. And I'm using 3 colors. I'm using Tahitian Tide, Parakeet Party, and Sweet Sorbet. So I'm bringing those in again. And I'm just trying to use the in colors. And I thought it was kind of cool to have multiple colors for the frames because it would also pull in multiple colors from what I used when I did the 2-step stamping. Now, I am going to do one thing on the large die, the one that's on the Tahitian Tide. And that is that I am going to put a little bit of twine around it. I'm going to show you on how it is done. So I wanted to just add a little bit of a fun bling in the middle. And I'm going to put a little bit of twine on that one right now, because that is about to go onto my card front. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of the Simply Elegant trim. It's very coiled when you take it out, but if you just run that right behind your thumbnail, you can get it so it's pretty straight. And I'm going to use the super upscale tool of Scotch tape. And I'm just going to eyeball this and put a little bit like that. Literally, I'm just going to wrap it around. So I'm just going to take tape and try to get kind of straight. Wrap it around the back. And tape on here and just cut it right off. And that is totally optional. I just wanted to add a little bit of gold in the middle. All right, we are now ready to put things back together. Let's talk about the order that we're going to do that. When we die cut these 2 first. Now what we want to do is we want to put the largest, or the one in the middle, the one that I die cut last, is going to get put on the card first. And the reason for that is it's going to be in the background. I want these 2 dies to be in the foreground because they're complete rectangles. That means that I'm going to take this piece and I am going to put it back in. And this is the piece that you've got a fantastic cheat for. Because when you put it back down, look at what happens. You have a bunch of straight lines that are going to tell you exactly where it needs to go. You've got a straight line here, you've got a straight line there, you've got a straight line there, and you've got a straight line there. And then you can also look around and see that those partial designs, like the stem, it looks like it's straight. That leaf looks like it's exactly where it needs to be. So I need to glue that piece down. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And because I know that I've got this twine, I'm going to put special attention on glue on the middle. And I'll just get a little bit around the outside. And I'm going to glue that down. Now I'm looking straight in. I am first looking at where those lines are. So I can see where those lines are coming together. And then I'm going to look at where the lines on my design is or are. Trying to get that stem so it looks straight. I'm trying to get the leaf up in the upper left so it looks like it's continuous. And just checking on a couple things. Your eye and your brain will fill in. It doesn't need to be perfect. And I'm just going to go ahead and then it doesn't matter which one you go for next. You're going to do either or. I'll just probably do this one. Now I don't have the lines to help me on this because there are only going to be lines for this rectangle. There's not going to be an empty space. But I do want to make sure that I have the right one and that it's in the right orientation. And I'm just looking at this and I'm trying to see, okay, these lining up, petal lining up. Does it look like it's kind of all coming together? Because I'm using a liquid glue, I've got a little bit of grace to move that around. And now when I'm happy, I'm just going to put it down. Isn't that cool? Because you can see that pattern looks like it's continuing, which it is. And then our last piece, we're going to go ahead and put it in here. And not magic, it's the same thing we've been doing. So I'm just going to add some glue to this. I'm really concentrating the glue more in the middle. The middle will help. We've got 2 layers of cardstock that we're doing here. So I'm going to, again, as fast as I can, start this process. Try to get things so that they look like they're lined up. This is a good one. That leaf is really going to help me. This petal is going to help me. And because these are the stitched dies, I've got stitching on the top and stitching on the bottom. I don't want that bottom stitching to show. So that's also a good way for me to judge. Good to go. All right. So we have our pieces back together. That's how you put the pieces back together. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bow, which I already had pre-made. I did a double bow. And for this, I'll be honest, I am not a big glue dot fan. I've not had great luck with glue dots. They tend to hold things the way I want them to. But a really, really good glue that a lot of people don't use as glue is Shimmery Crystal Effects. This is brilliant. It is super strong. And if it messes up, you get a nice shiny finish. And you just put some on. It does take a couple minutes to dry. I'm just going to put that right there and let that do its thing. But this is a really inexpensive way to get some nice glue. And then the last thing for this card is a little bit more bling. I will trim the tails on that when the glue is dry. And for this card, I mean, flowers and butterflies, they definitely go together. And I'm going to use my quick pick tool, which I love, to pick up a couple of butterflies for this. I like to put these butterflies so that they are flying between the layers of the card. So I will purposely put that one so it's partially on the white and partially on the starry sky. I just think it makes it look that much more interesting. And then down here, I'll just tack that one. Kind of the same thing. I want it partially on the die cut and partially on the parakeet party. And I'm one who likes to do threes. So I'll probably just stick another one. And that was a nice empty space. So you can sit right there. And that's it. That's how to make the, I think, just beautiful, beautiful slimline card that shows off all the in colors and also is really fun with the triple die cut with a twist. I'm going to bring back the other card that I had so you can see the two together. And, you know, a couple of differences. Stronger ink, second generation ink on the bottom, slightly different color cardstock, a little bit darker on the top. That's the Starry Sky. This is the Orchard Oasis. And the sentiment. I like them both. I think the bolder Sweet Sorbet with the bolder colors really does a nice job there. And this one was the Orchid Oasis. So that kind of blends together as well. Before I stop, I just wanted to show you a couple more of these cards that I've done with the same technique. These are not slimline cards. This is one that I did with the Sunflower stamp set. I used some designer series paper, which you may be able to see in the background. It has a little bit of the leaves. I stamped the sunflowers. Then I used the watercolor pencils to color those. And on this one, I used the square dies. And on the smallest of the squares, I chose to do some embossing on vellum, and then I wrapped that little piece around the smallest die and used a couple of different colors of cardstock for the frame. So this one was a build-up with stamps. This one is done completely with designer series paper, and this You're a Peach designer series paper unfortunately is no longer available. It's actually sold out. It was in the annual catalog that will be discontinued on Monday, tomorrow. But same thing, and I thought this worked really well with just different colors of the frames. And some really fun little things there are going on with that. And this is actually on another video that I posted. I did want to show you an experiment. And this is one that I did using concentric dies. So the frames were also cut with dies. And in my opinion, and this is my opinion, I think those frames are too wide, which is why the process that I've been going through is cutting the frames like I did on these to be just a little bit wider and taller than the actual die cuts. It gives you a little bit more ability to size the frames that are going to go around your die cuts. So these are some different examples of what you can do, and it really is a lot of fun. And it's definitely something that when people look at this, if you sent these to some folks, you're going to say, how in the heck, how did you do that? Because this design just carries through the entire thing. So super fun. So I hope you will give the triple die cutting with a twist a try. And I really, really would love to see what you make. So happy stamping and Inky hugs.